It is Thursday, May 7th, and this is Set the Table. This is episode 11. I am John, and with me is Jack.
How's it going, eh?
And episode 11 here is going to be us talking about fudging rolls. We are here to talk about tabletop roleplay games and how you can improve your DM/GM skills. And fudging rolls is definitely something worth talking about. Before we get started in our main conversation, how's Dalrea doing, our terrifying gnome friend?
So my terrifying Smurf Neblin, I purposely taught myself how to say that word, just to annoy my other players. She is taking a break.
It's not that hard.
Smurf Neblin, yeah.
Smurf Neblin.
I think it's the SV that messes up most English speakers. But
yeah,
we are on a break. We are
Ooh.
doing a one-off. We're playing we're using a system called Monster of the Week.
Mm-hmm.
Which is set in the 1980s, which has been a little bit difficult. We talked a little bit about method acting and player types, and I've shared some of my my things. I've done a fairly good job of keeping my mouth shut because, as the listeners know, I'm more advanced in years than some folks in the podcast, and I vividly remember the 1980s, and I'm playing a 10-year-old girl in the 1980s. So my fellow players are saying things like, "Oh, I'm just going to go upstairs and play Sonic the Hedgehog," and it's like, no, you're not. Sonic the Hedgehog was released in '91. You're probably playing an Atari 2600, so we could play Outlaw, we could play Adventure, we could play Combat, but you're not playing Sonic. And then there was another scene that involved a TV remote control. It's like, oh my gosh, your parents must be rich, because remote controls really weren't very prominent in the 1980s. You still had to get up off the couch and go change the channel. So, but I was
that's
good.
The history nerd in you, though.
Well, I mean, I remember it's like being Philip J. Fry in Futurama. Like, if you lived in the 20th century, that's the only way to get an A in my class. It's like, I remember all these things. They're talking about stuff like, oh, I'm going to put on my inline skates. And it's like, same thing. We're going to go to the store. It's a Sunday. It's like, there's still laws. You can't go, certain stores aren't open on Sunday in the 1980s. But it was fun. Monster a Week is kind of like it feels like a Stranger Things, like we're kids, or Goonies, right? Mm-hmm. Weird things are happening. One of the characters has a strange superpower, and we're confronting Call of Cthulhu-esque style monsters.
Man, that sounds pretty fun.
It is pretty fun. Although I'm a North American fifth grader, so I miss terrifying people and singing, and but we'll get back to it sooner or later.
Sure. So as a method actor, it's probably good for you to get a break from all the evil.
Yeah, probably. It's probably a good time, just take a step back, and what it'll do is it'll help me kind of energize my plans and make me even more evil later on.
Biding your evil.
That's it. So what have you been up to?
Oh, all right. So I mentioned it last time that we were gearing up to bring an exciting conclusion to a main game campaign that we've been playing for 2 years. And so last it was Sunday, we began the climax of the final battle of this 2-year campaign. The party started on the edge of this volcanic caldera, knowing that there was a ritual about to begin somewhere between there and the mouth of where the volcano opens up. And so at the end of the previous session, one of the players had used this item that I had called Mysterious Prayer Beads to pray to an unknown god that I was going to have function basically like a wish spell. And so there was lots of conditions in play, but to make a long story shorter, they used that item to pray for one of the other players' previous characters to come back to aid them in this fight. And so, in addition to that, they freed the soul of a man trapped inside a weapon for over 3,000 years, who called out to his god and got blessed. So they ended up with the character back, the character with a new magic weapon, and a diva to fight alongside the party. And it was the most exhausting and exciting at times combat that I had run in my experience. I had 5 level 7s, 2 level 9 paladins with them, 20 level 3 paladin chumps, a horde of demons that totaled 40 or 50 that I wasn't. I mean, I ran them in groups for the most part, but I think we ended up with 18, 19, 20 different things on my initiative tracker, so it was a lot. And then an exciting surprise to that was that I had asked a player who had taken a break a couple months back if he wanted to join us for this session, because he had been with us for the first year and a half of this campaign, and I kind of wanted him to be able to see the end. I actually asked him if I could just run his character that he played for the first year, who was the first of a few characters to switch out once my party started kind of wanting to do that. And that was kind of, everybody missed him, and he was a lot of fun. So during the first or second round of combat, he comes leaping off a pillar, and I invited the guy to the Skype call, and everyone got all excited. So that was I had to keep that secret for a week from Callie, who plays Katrana and who would have been, the most likely to cry upon seeing this character. But all of that was good. And then the battle went all right. It was really good for the first, 5 or 6 rounds, and with 18 things on the initiative tracker, a round takes like 15 to 20 minutes. So, after they cleared some of the beginning, three of the party members started to sort of like rush towards where they had found the ritual caster who was casting the ritual, and every round things seemed to be getting worse. And so before rushing up there, one of the warlocks, the warlock cast Hunger of Hadar, which is this great area of effect spell. And another player like willingly teleported himself and a buddy into that area of effect, and then proceeded to like complain to that other player how dumb the spell was. So that was pretty unfortunate, and then that ended up causing kind of an argument that I needed to sort of like shout to stop, which was not super fun. I don't like shouting during, board games. It's not, I play these things to be happy and have fun, not to be frustrated. So, there was that, and then the player who had teleported sort of argued about a ruling that I had on a homebrew version of an anti-magic zone, and that was totally my fault. But after we usually play a 3 to 4 hour session, most often 3 to 3.5, and we were closing in on 5 hours. So, no, we were over 5 hours. So the battle was halfway over. We had made it to the beginning of round 10, and I think people were getting tired, and I was getting a little frustrated. I was tired, so I was a little overwhelmed with keeping track of everything, and so we called a halfway point in the fight there, because I honestly didn't expect that it would take quite so long. But that was the whole thing. I sent a message to my group the next day, sort of clarifying some things, because I did handle the anti-magic zone a little poorly. Um, and I had offered meta knowledge that the players wouldn't have had just for the sake of like getting people to stop arguing. So I wasn't as like excited and hype about it by the end as I thought I would have been, but I think that we will be able to have an epic conclusion to it at the end of this session. But that is, yeah, I don't know. It was a lot to keep track of, um, and phew.
Cool.
So
Very cool.
yeah. All right. We'll see how it goes. Um, I am I am excited in a relieved sort of way that that arc of the campaign will come to a close. Um, but moving on, because I could talk about that all day. Last time we had one of my players, Thornton, on as a guest, and if you haven't listened to episode 10, you probably should go back and do so. It was one of the better episodes that we've done so far. And in considering new DMs, this time we're talking about fudging roles, kind of controversial sometimes, pretty system dependent, and I think newer DMs are more likely to do it, and it's something that we should clear up a little.
Sure.
Um,
So what do you mean when you say fudging rolls?
so I think typically like the gut instinct is like changing the result of a die roll in secret, or not showing someone and just changing what the face of the die says, or I like to think of it more broadly as otherwise changing the chance for a particular action or course of action to succeed or fail. So, changing 20 from a 19 so that a player doesn't get crit on the first round of combat, or lowering a DC of a roll on the fly because you need the players to succeed to get past the hurdle to get to the next thing. Something like that.
Okay.
What do you think? How do you use fudging rolls?
So same thing. So modifying. So I don't know if I necessarily change the value that was rolled on the dice. So in your example, hey, it's we're playing Keep on the Borderlands, and you walk into the first Cobalt uh, cave, and they throw they shoot a sling at your level 1 character and they crit you. Um, I'd look at the 20. I probably wouldn't change the roll. I'd look at the 20 and then just do something different.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, not physically
yeah.
changing the face, but
Right. So yeah. So that's some listeners may like, oh, you go from a 20, do you change rotate the die? I don't rotate the die. I just
no.
change uh the meaning of what happens, just to make sure that we stay kind of true to the narrative, right?
Right. Or in something like Keep on the Borderlands, on the first room, one of the players just getting killed is going to leave kind of a sour. That's not a
Yeah.
good start to an adventure.
Nope. And that's our cleric, and the rest of us are all
We
damage
just
dealers.
we just had a 4-hour session 0 where we made the character like
And now he's dead. Hooray!
yeah.
Now some games, and like you were saying, this is very system dependent, because there are some games. I'm thinking, I didn't pull the book off the shelf, but Numenera is. I'm looking at Numenera, um, and for those listeners unfamiliar with the Numenera or the cipher system from Monty Cook games, the storyteller, the GM, never rolls dice ever.
Mhm.
So there's no fudging of dice on the GM's perspective. Like if you roll dice behind a screen or something,
Right.
the players are the ones rolling the dice, so they see what's happening, um, and it is what it is. Uh, Although that game also has mechanics to kind of, um, I guess, and I know we've got this later in the show notes about, why do you do it, when do you do it, um, but I think there are some game systems like 5e and Starfinder and Pathfinder, um, Call of Cthulhu is probably on that list too, where, um, the dice are tied directly to success and failure.
Right.
And I think that's where we see the desire to fudge these rolls. Like I'm going to roll this die and my cleric's dead. Well,
Womp
my
womp.
cleric's my cleric's dead because of one bad die roll. Other systems, Seventh Sea does away with this completely, right?
Hmm.
And so doesn't Fiasco. I mean, there's in Fiasco the dice do nothing other than create your character.
Right. And
Um,
Alien's got an interest. Ooh, I'm getting some echo. I can hear myself sometimes.
oh no.
Um, we'll see if that persists. I was gonna say Alien has sort of an interesting take on that, where if the die roll isn't what you want, like there's a mechanic to fudge the whole roll. Like,
Yes, yeah, actually that's the stress, right? I can
yeah,
if I get a bad die roll, I can we haven't used the verb retcon very often, but I can basically I'm not going to take that roll or my character was going to do this thing and then they realized at the last moment that they need to stop and take a breath or they need to get a running start or and then I'm going to roll again. Of course that
sure.
incurs a penalty where you gain stress and in aliens
I did
um
that. I did that a bunch because I was the Marine, so I would, take a shot and miss and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna keep shooting."
I'm going to keep shooting and I'm going to I'm going to dig down, I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to aim a little bit better, I'm going to chastise myself. You're a Marine rifleman, why are you doing that, in
But
my
every
own head, and then
second
pull the
that goes
trigger.
by is more and more difficult.
Right.
Yeah, no, Alien handles fudging really well, actually. I hadn't thought of that before right now, but that's an
Yeah,
awesome. Ooh, all right.
that's a awesome mechanic. And then you look at other systems like
So I hold on, because
okay,
I don't want to get too hung up in the systems yet, because I
sure,
think we should talk about it. Do like the broad, um, cover it. If you're gonna do it in systems where it makes sense to, then
sure,
what's the deal with it, and then break it down system dependent.
okay,
Um, so like you said, like who's fudging roles, and I think that this is gonna have to get knocked to system dependent, because it depends on if the DMGM isn't rolling dice, then obviously not them.
right,
um, but in systems where it would make sense to, I'm just gonna say 5e because that is what the majority of people are playing. Um, I think it should really only be the DM, but like in my group, I think that I trust my players enough that if I told them just to make up numbers when I asked for rolls, we would still have sort of the same quality of game. uh, so I think it only becomes a problem when players are doing it consistently, but that will come up a little bit later.
okay.
Um,
And I think that again that we get into the system dependency weeds, but if you're in a system that is lends itself to those kind of life or death, um, the game continues or the game stops type roles, that yes, that's the DM's job, definitely.
do you do it? Do you fudge rolls?
Um, yes, I do,
Okay, I was gonna say
absolutely.
I think there isn't a I don't think there would be a great DM out there who does it. Not to say that great DMs fudge roles, but I think fudging roles is part of learning how to be a DM at the very least, and I think we've all done it. Um,
Well, I think especially as an experienced DM, um, again, you'll for folks who are new, right? It's like, oh, you have to have experience. Um, but if you are if you're we'll take combat off the table. Um, you're playing a game. There's a secret door, and behind the secret door is something very important to the narrative of the game. And there's been several clues that have led up to the characters getting to this room, and right, I'm gonna look for secret doors, and they roll and they Um, well, you as the DM now have to think, well, what kind of brainstorm in your head? What are my players going to do? They don't find a secret door. They're going to go back to town. They're going to go back to the tavern. They're going to, they're supposed to get a key behind the secret door. There's no key. They're going to wind up spending 2 more or 3 more sessions crawling through a dungeon, and they're going to get to a locked door that can't be picked, and they have to have this key. Like, is this the kind of group that's going to do that and go, well, crap, now we could go back through and see where we missed the key? Or is this the kind of group that's going to go,
Why can't we
"We're
open the door?
locked. There's no key.
I have
Back to the
lockpicks
tavern
though.
for beers," right? I mean,
Yeah.
it and again, it's group dependent, and it's goal dependent, really.
Mhm.
But um, yeah, that's what I would, and that's what I do. I kind of roll through my head like they just failed this critical role. Um, yeah, I know. Um, this story ruin. I call them story wreckers, right? There's a story wrecking
Mm.
role. They didn't
Yep.
make it, and now the story's wrecked. And we talked about modules already in another show, but that's one of the cardinal rules of writing modules. It's in Goodman Games writing adventure modules that don't suck, is to not put those in. Now, some modules still have them, right?
Right.
Um,
They increase drama, it's a narrative piece, but it is difficult to weave in a game development sense.
right. And then, I mean, because you could like, okay, they didn't find the secret door, they don't have the key, they made it to the vault. There's no way to get into the vault, and now they're all bent out of shape. Let's just, it's like we're all tired. We don't have our spell slots. Let's go back to town and recharge and think about what our options are. And then, right, as a GM, even though it's not written into the module, when they walk into the tavern, there's a bard singing about, the key with wings behind the altar, and it's some folk tale that he learned when he was little, and
Mm.
it's more clues like, okay, go back to this place.
Right.
um, but and then of course you still run the risk of they'll roll poorly again.
But yeah, exactly. So at that point, then I do the DC fudge, and if before their investigation was like a 2 on a D20, and now they rolled an 11, even though they needed a 15, it's like, oh, you've been here before. This time you decide to check more carefully, and you find a little bit of dust drifting in the breeze towards those stones over there. There's a draft, and then they go and investigate the stones. I mean, maybe for the sake of like brevity, I would just say that they find the door
They
more than having
find
them
the door,
roll
right?
again. But um, yeah, yeah, weave it in. Uh, is that why? Okay, so we kind of already answered like why it's okay to fudge rolls at all. And in terms of Callie asked me when I was talking earlier, she asked what the show was about, and I said fudging rolls, and she said, "Oh, geez, do you do that?" I was like, "Yeah, I fudge the rolls sometimes if I need to." Um, and she was like, "What, isn't that like cheating?" And I wouldn't call it cheating because there's not winning or losing at tabletop roleplay games. It's not DM versus players. It's not me. Oh, this monster is gonna crit you every time.
So it's this is where I will, before I say that's game system dependent, which it totally is,
It is.
I'll say it is group dependent as well. You may have a group that is totally okay with the the whims of fate, right? If you have fair dice and you're rolling them, they may, like my group, my Monday group, um, most of us, I would say the preponderance of us are totally comfortable with that's where the dice rolled. And if we didn't find the key and we got to the unopenable door, then we have to go back and look for the key. And if we went to the room with the secret door and we still didn't find the secret door, tough tough toenails, come back tomorrow and look again.
Sure.
My Monday group is very comfortable with that kind of gameplay.
Okay.
Um, so I think that's very group. Like you could have a group that says, nope, we failed. Like, yep, my cleric got one shotted by a kobold day one, room one. That is right. He was not in the face. He did not have the strength of Lolth, and the goddess has not taken favor on him,
Hmm.
or whatever religious tradition you follow. Um, and that's just it. It wasn't meant to be. Roll another
I
character
I
and
think
try
my
again.
yeah, I think my group definitely likes to feel a little more, heroic and important. Um, and then I've also thrown in here is it not is it against the rules to fudge dice? And I'm gonna say that the golden rule of any tabletop RPG is that the DM has the final say. So if they want to just make up every die roll, then that's what they do, and technically that is allowed. Whether you want to play at that table or not is up to you, but um, I
Right.
mean and
It's
that's an
always
extreme.
no, and but it, like rule number one for me is everyone has fun.
Yep.
Okay, and if that cleric who gets one shotted by a cobalt guard is cool with that and that's fun, then we've satisfied rule number one. But if that's gonna if this is a new player and they've sat down at the table and they spent 25-30 minutes making a character and now they're going to see that character die in the first 3 minutes of the game, no, that's not fun.
Hmm.
um, so that's, yeah, I am totally down with fudging those types of systems to make sure that folks are having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when the fun of the game matters more than the effects of the action for which you are fudging a roll for. Um, we've talked about before, like throwing really challenging monsters at a party and, intending for them not to fight, but identify that they should run away. And you don't want you as the DM don't want that encounter to be so deadly. And you happen to, roll a natural 20. Fudge it down to the value of a 19 and roll regular damage instead. Um,
Or I'm thinking of a module now from the Skull and Shackles in the Pathfinder series.
mhm.
Uh, the low level characters are press ganged onto a pirate ship, and there's a combat scene, and they're supposed to surrender.
Ah,
And if you're the captain, and if you're the DM, right, and you're the captain of the pirate ship, and you're playing the pirate NPCs, we have to, again. This is kind of this. We haven't talked about how to play villains and NPCs as the DM. It's probably another good show.
oh
Uh,
yeah,
but if you've press ganged a dozen people out of a tavern, like, you don't press gang people to kill them and throw them overboard.
right.
You
You would have just
need
killed him.
able bodied sailors. So yeah, the combat, I'm gonna fight you to the death. No, you're not, because even though I'm critting you with a 20, I've switched to non-lethal because I want to knock your
Oh,
butt out, put you in the hold, and give you bread and water until you say, yes, I'll sail for the next three weeks with you. Or, right,
there
you're
you
gonna
go.
sit hold and get, a little piece of hardtack and a cup of water every day, and you're going to lose a lot of weight and have some pretty bad malnutrition, and
Right. That you're
we'll
not gonna have
let you
fun sitting in the hold.
right. So that's the other thing too, is just because you're critting and you're rolling these things doesn't necessarily mean that the you have to think back to what's this NPC's motivation, and sometimes,
Right.
yeah, it is, I'm the Cobalt Guard, and these people are trying to raid my home and take my things. I'm going to defend everything with my life. But um, in a lot of cases, most intelligent creatures won't fight to the death.
Yes,
Yeah.
most
Um,
intelligent creatures.
and most and even some animals, once they subdue you, they'll run away,
Hmm.
right? I mean, unless you're fighting an alligator or a shark, right?
Yeah,
Um,
something
you
that
know,
wants to eat you.
the mama bear's defending her cubs. She's knocked you all to 0 hit points. She's gonna pick up her cub by the scruff of the neck and run for the woods.
Hmm.
She's not gonna deliver killing blows to every
Three.
single
She's
character.
gonna continue wailing on dead bodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, bears aren't. Probably
Now she
something about bears.
once she gets her cub to safety, she might come back and grab one of your corpses for food. But
Mm.
hopefully by then you know
Made your death saves.
somebody has made a death save and they're helping the other players.
So it might be, and some of these, I mean, all of these things are going to end up being system dependent, but in the systems that so 5e, Pathfinder, Starfinder, GURPS, um,
Call of Cthulhu.
when do you fudge a roll? And we've come up with a couple scenarios, but for the sake of sort of a more of a concise, like, here is a
A rule
framework
of
for a scenario. Oh, rules of
so
thumb. There
so
you go.
so for my rule of thumb is um, if the outcome of the roll is going to have a severely negative impact on the narrative.
Or okay.
Okay. Um, and that could be a character death. That could be a key piece of something that they need. That could be one of these module breaking rolls. If it's one of those, I'll fudge the roll. Now here's the but I'll also, right. I haven't gotten to that point. When I fudge rolls, just to keep the fates, just to not draw the ire of the fates or whatever.
To keep the status quo.
Yes, I will usually create some kind of impact. So let's go back to the secret door with the key that you have to have, right?
Hmm.
The critical key. You blew the roll, okay? So you figured out you need to come back. You've come back. You blow the roll again, but I'm gonna fudge it. But in the process of opening that secret door, you broke your rapier.
Oof. All right.
Okay, so now you don't that weapon can't be used in combat. You've got to switch back to your dagger, or you've got to borrow a weapon from somebody else. So to keep the universe in balance, I will traditionally levy some kind of penalty or negative consequence if I fudge a roll in the player's favor.
Okay. Yeah. My rule of thumb is to fudge rolls very very sparingly and almost always in favor of the players. Um, and I excuse me. And I don't. Oh, I'm gonna take a sip of water here. Um, and I don't fudge rolls that have to do with anything lethality. So, death saving throws or um, potentially lethal traps. And I don't fudge rolls just for the lulls of it. Um, and we gave a couple examples earlier. If you've got a low-level party who just made their character and they're super excited to play, and your first roll on your first combat would be a crit, and they would knock them out, changing that a little bit. To stop something that was intended to be threatening but not lethal from becoming too lethal. Um, Sometimes fudge a roll to allow a PC an epic moment. They got the rope bridge snapped and they're plummeting down, and they try to grab on to one of the ropes, and it's a DC 15 in your DM notes, but they roll a 14 and you're like, oh, but you're gonna fall to water 60 feet below, take 66 in falling damage, and then be attacked by crocodiles. you manage to grab the rope, but it burns your hands as it goes, suffer, 1d4 fire damage, and you manage to hold on. Um, you already mentioned for narrative reasons. Um,
Yeah.
I do it occasionally when I, as the DM, realize that I've made a mistake. If I have balanced an encounter poorly, or if I referred to, the wrong modifier, or I didn't have time to look up exactly what the strength modifier on the bear was, but if it's a +4 instead of a +2, then it would have done 2 more damage, but um, or misusing, a stat block or a spell level. Sometimes I will fudge rolls to alleviate frustration if I see that in players. You know that I've played with several first time groups, uh, and
Yeah.
and and sometimes when people are getting frustrated that they just can't succeed at anything, 5 rolls below a 10 in a row, and everyone else is passing acrobatics and disarming traps, and you're over there with half your shoulder sliced open from a swinging axe blade, and all you want to do is put, chuck the key into the hole from a distance, give them a little bit of something to help them feel a little better, um, or to alleviate DM frustration. Where, uh, and I guess this goes beyond fudging a roll, but um, one of the boss encounters throughout this campaign, my party dealt with like far easier than I thought they would have. And the end boss at the time there was a CR5, and I just threw an extra CR8 monster in at the end. This portal opens. It made sense thematically. It's gonna sound like it doesn't, but there was a portal there, and through that rip, another demon managed to emerge before the power of the first boss had completely evaporated. Um, and so that's fudging an encounter, but to alleviate frustration can be an okay. Like you said, as long as everyone's having fun.
Right. That's the goal.
Yeah. And what about trust? Because I feel like as we've been talking about this, as I've been listening to myself talk about it a little bit, um, you need trust to make RPGs function. The players have to believe that you are going to give them a reasonable and realistic description of the world and events as they happen, and to be the fair and neutral personification of everyone that they meet and all the creatures that they fight. And you as the DM have to trust players to respect your judgment and your rulings. And so if you find out that, like, if in a 5e game you discover that behind the screen your DM is rolling dice but is just arbitrarily deciding what happens, the game becomes less risky, exciting, and magical. And if they're not doing it fairly, it feels like the decisions of the players, largely don't matter. Balance in the universe no longer exists. Um, so I think that if you, as a new DM or any DM, are thinking about fudging rolls or need to fudge a roll, it should happen very rarely and be used to like help epic moments feel epic and keep everything balanced, and without being punishing or frustrating for your players or for yourself.
Right. So you want to have the deft hands of a safecracker, or a guy who burns down his own bar for the insurance money, as long as it looks like an electrical thing, right?
Yes, sorry, muted myself so I could take a sip of water. I don't know why my throat is so scratchy. Um, I think that fudging rolls could be a session 0 thing, and as we get close to the system discussion, one of the things that will come up in session 0 is talking about what system you're going to play, and that might be how much fate does your DM want in their hands. or how much fate do your players want the DM to have in their hands.
Sure.
Um, I like I included this in my notes. That in something like 5e, I'm sort of the school of thought that ignorance is bliss, where if you're a new DM and you really don't know if your encounters are going to be balanced correctly, or you haven't played with any of the players and not everybody knows all the rules, like you can tell people, hey, some of these rolls are going to be fudged so that things don't go too poorly or you know without any challenge at all, and maybe everyone will be fine with that. Otherwise, I think the play is to just not mention it, and it'll be fine until it emerges as a problem. um, if your players aren't really thinking about it, then they won't feel like anything is unfair.
Right.
um, and I like the Futurama quote for this one from the episode where Bender is God. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all.
Yeah, that was the lead in, right? The like a safecracker or a guy who burns down his own bar for the insurance money.
Yes.
As long as it looks like
Yeah.
and
Um,
yeah, episodes too.
but if it does become a problem, like if you've got a player who's fudging all of their rolls, there was a case on the Reddit a little while back of a newer DM who's like, I think a player is fudging rolls in 2 sessions. He hasn't rolled anything less than an 11. And they were playing on a digital platform, so I think that the solution to that is using a virtual die roller, which sort of eliminates the possibility of that. But I don't do that. Most of my players roll with real dice, and I've never suspected them of fudging anything that made the game not fun. So until it becomes not
We play
fun.
on roll 20, so everybody sees the die rolls unless the GM does a GM roll.
Oh, see, I like my. I've got my. I need the physical dice in my hands. I'm too tactile for that. But I
Yeah.
also, don't fudge rolls very much. And
Yeah.
when I do, it's often in favor of the players. So, um, trust is important. That is definitely a session zero issue. And if fudging rolls becomes an issue, then you can try to address it for what you're doing. Use a virtual die roller, or you could play a system where fudging rolls isn't really something that happens, like Numenera, or in the pre-show you were telling me about Genesis.
Yeah. So I think again, I like to look at things kind of as a spectrum. So um, there are completely like so seventh C. I think at the very far end of the spectrum is probably um, Fiasco, where
Hmm.
there's no dice rolling.
I mean, you do, right? But like, you don't have to. You could just pick from the book.
You roll the dice to basically build your character and your relationships to the story, but then you just go around telling a story.
Right,
Um,
but even those die rolls, like it's so for people who don't know, my what I recall from the Fiasco book was that, there would be a table with relationship to villain, and mother, father, sibling, cousin, employer, whatever.
yeah,
And it's just 1d6 options. So theoretically, you could just pick from those and the game would still run.
yes, and you don't have to pick. So there's several different tables in a playset. One of those tables defines relationships between characters. There's a motivation table. There's a location table. There's an object table. There's a bunch of different tables, and you can, and yes, if you get to the point where you're playing with folks and the last die on the table for you to pull off the table is my motivation is to get laid, and you're not comfortable with that motivation as a character, um, you could again, that's kind of a game setup thing. It's like I really don't want this motivation. It's like, oh, okay, well, you don't take a motivation. Let's look on the other tables and figure out what that should be. Oh, it should be location. You start in prison. Oh, okay, I'll start the game in prison.
Nice. And now everybody's having fun, and it
and
doesn't
everybody's
matter
having
what
fun.
the die
Everybody's
roll
having a good
was.
time. Um, but the outcome of the scenes and what's happening, not dice related.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's a pure, like, if you don't like random stuff, Fiasco is probably not a bad game to look at. And then there's Seventh Sea, where um, there's a bunch of mechanics inside of Seventh Sea that
Ooh.
basically the whole idea of fudging rolls. Um,
You cut out there a
there's a
little
lot
bit.
of, oh,
Yeah.
so Seventh Sea Second Edition has a ton of mechanics that kind of make it so you don't need to fudge rolls.
Hmm.
They have hero points, right? And a lot of the games that we're going to talk about, a lot of the systems have this currency. Like you've got a chip, a poker chip, or a coin or something, and if you don't like the roll, you can hand in that chip and re-roll, or you can hand in that chip for a special um, ability that makes the roll irrelevant, that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
um, Seventh Sea has hero points. Savage Worlds has hero points as well. That's kind of in a lot of the newer systems that they. I think that's a direct result of I did poorly on this one roll and I've ruined the game. Where nope, here's my hero point. I don't need to make that roll. I'm going to use this ability that lets me succeed,
Mm.
or um, I'm going to use this hero point to re-roll my poor system, my poor roll.
In 10 Candles, your character creation items, and I've talked about that a little bit, but like you get 4 index cards that other people have written that you pass around the table to build your character, and it's a good thing, a bad thing, a hope, and a moment. And if you would, it, I think, I might not remember 100% here, but I think that even if you are not the one who's rolling the dice, if it makes sense for that personality trait to come into play, you can seize control of the scene and then,
Nice.
change the outcome of something. And that could be, not even the dice pool that you rolled from, but that's a in that system that is a facet of character creation even.
Nice. That's very cool. Oh, the One Ring, the Lord of the Rings. There's a pool of points. They're called fellowship points, and they act
Oh,
in
yep.
that same kind of. I want to re-roll that, or I want that outcome to be different. And then one that I just picked up and started reading about, or reading the core rulebook, was the from Fantasy Flight. It's their Genesis roleplay game system.
Yeah,
It's
you
the
started to tell me about this one, and this sounded neat.
and this is actually the engine behind all of the Star Wars roleplay games, the modern ones, not the West End. The 30-year-old West End was I think it was a 2D6 system, but this is the new modern Fantasy Flight Star Wars roleplay game. Edge of the was it Edge
Edge
of
of
the
the
Empire.
Empire. Yeah.
Yeah, those books all use this, and it's a what they call a narrative dice system. So it's Fantasy Flight, so you have to buy their dice, and they have different shapes. I'm grabbing my set just so I can talk to them intelligently.
Yeah, yeah, do it up.
But so you have different sets of dice, and they have different sides. So you have 6-sided, 8-sided, and 12-sided dice, and there are positive dice that you put into your dice pool when you're trying to take an action or do some combat or do something fun or exciting. And then there are negative dice. So there are ability dice and a bunch of other. I won't name them all off but you build this dice pool and you roll it, and the different faces, they're not numbers, they're all different symbols, but the symbols either mean success or failure, and then triumph, or chaos. I forget the names, but anyway, um, what it results in is you can roll these dice and succeed at something and have a negative outcome. Or you could roll the dice and fail, but somewhere in that failure is a positive situation or circumstance or result for your character.
Okay.
It's it's very different.
So like I'm trying to hotwire a speeder and I fail at hotwiring the speeder and zap my fingers. However, there's a bunch of credits sitting in the glove box. Like,
Yes, yeah. As you're hot wiring the speeder, you knock loose the sack of credits that was jammed up under the dash, and now you can't get away from storms. But now you've got a sack of money that you're able to bribe them with,
nice. Okay,
or
that's
you're
I
dueling
like that.
you're dueling that stupid Jedi, and um, you you beat him, right? You cut his hand off, but then your lightsaber cuts off,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
now yeah, I succeed. The thing happened to me. Now I'm unarmed for the rest of this battle that's unfolding around me.
Very cool.
So it's very different.
Mechanically, but not so much
The
thematically. Oh,
you know thematically it creates a lot of interesting outcomes.
but I could do something similar in 5e and say, "Oh, you got to roll with advantage, but even though you didn't see the rogue hiding over there, you did spot an herb that the druid might like." It's not as common,
Yes, and
and it definitely is not
it's
encouraged or talked about at all, but I I,
right.
I
It's
could.
right. A specific GM could incorporate these kinds of outcomes into any game. It's just that the Genesis system has them baked right into the mechanics,
Hmm. No, that is
right?
pretty cool.
And especially if you're new, right? If you're a new role player, you can definitely see how this would help a new role player kind of come up with those. And there's a whole chapter in the book that talks about the narrative dice and how to kind of think about these outcomes and what to do because a success with a despair, that's the word I was looking for. I succeeded in my role, but I rolled a despair. what, what does that really look like? You whatever the thing is that you were challenging, you've succeeded, but you've got this despair to worry about now,
Hmm.
and it means something bad.
It definitely sounds like a system that would be perhaps better suited for people who have like the background in improv or DMs who are comfortable or excited about that aspect of DMing.
Yes, yeah. The Genesis system, I think, is and there again we were talking about systems now, so that's a seventh C fiasco. I think any of these systems where there's a lot of improv or ad libbing, yeah, you've got to be comfortable in that environment and
Hmm.
trust, right? You've got to have the trust of your players because that's just yeah, okay, yeah, you defeated that Jedi, cut his hand off, he's running away, your lightsaber cuts out. What the hell?
But I got it. I got more successes.
I'm what am I now what am I gonna do? It's like you're a Sith. What do you think you should do? Like
Force choke the next guy you come across.
the next clone that walks by under your command, whip his blaster out of his hand and tell him to go find something, like
Yeah, there you go.
there's there's
I
lots
like
of
that.
different outcomes. But again, if your players aren't, I don't want to say create. Yeah, creative's the right word. If your players aren't creative like that, if they're kind of in a modality, if they're in a 5e mindset, and I'm not gonna poo poo 5e, but
No,
right,
you're right
there's a
though. Like,
5e mindset. I've got a character, I've got a role, I'm in this adventure, whether there's rails or not, I'm kind of following a path. Like if the DM's got rails for me, I sit on the rails. If the DM doesn't have rails for me, that system is good at giving players a rail to play, right? Because I'm a warlock in 5e, and I'm in a dungeon. There's certain things I'm going to do, um, and that's you wind up kind of in that mindset where you necessarily don't have license
It
to
it's
add.
it's a little harder to play with things because players see that glowing orange ball of fire and then get confused why it hits in a 40-foot radius instead. Like how it's not fireball's not supposed to be that big. It's like, well, it's not a traditional fireball. Get over it. Like it's harder to do that in 5e when more people know the rules and are like, I want what I expected. I don't
Right.
want my it's yeah.
No, and that's, I mean, that's why people have genres of fiction that they like, right? I mean, if you're
Mhm.
really into westerns and you sit down to read a western or watch a western, and all of a sudden a spaceship comes down and lands in the middle of town, like, hey, wait a minute,
Yeah, right. This isn't what I
right?
signed up for.
And I'm looking at my table, and right there is Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, written by Gary Gygax himself, and that pissed off a lot of people because I'm in Greyhawk. It's a fantasy setting, and I truck up this hill, and there's a robot. What the right? It's like
Yep.
that. You're breaking my genre.
You're
Um,
breaking up the band, Yoko.
right, and that's the same kind of thing. Um, DCC handles this with luck, the luck mechanic, right? You roll poorly, and you can say,
Oh,
"I'm gonna burn luck." Like I missed that roll by two.
yeah.
Screw it. Here's 2 luck points. I hit that guy.
I
Now I'm
forgot
not going to
about
be as
that.
lucky in the future, but I'm gonna get through this situation.
And that's a
Um,
really well balanced mechanical way of handling that too.
it is, and DCC Lankmar is even better because you have fleeting luck,
I feel
which again,
like every time we talk about systems, it makes me kind of wish that I was playing something other than 5e.
no, see, I don't
I,
want the listeners to feel that way because
I
5e is an excellent game system. Okay,
it totally is.
especially for new players because, like you were saying,
It is
there's
what you expect it
and
to
there's
be.
source material and there's a whole culture, and you can easily get brought into that. um it just, for me, and again, I'm not trying to sound elitist, once you get comfortable in 5e, that's when you should go to your friendly local game store, and there's always a shelf. It's in our local game store down in West Lev, Black Moon Games. It's the upper left shelf on the bookshelf, and it's full of these. It's got Fate, it's got Genesis, it's got Star Wars, DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics is there. Um, that's when you like, hey, what is that? Like, I mean, and there are other games. There are a ton of games, right?
Did you
Um,
say that you had two full copies of the DCC Player's Handbook or their core book?
so the core book, I have 2 hardback copies of the core book. Goodman Games is they are brilliant marketers, and they do limited edition covers and fake and faux leather covers, and certain certain art is only available at certain conventions. It's a racket. It's totally a racket. But yes, I have a soft cover and a hard cover
It's a
of
racket, but you
both.
love it.
It's a racket that I love, absolutely. Right?
I may borrow one of those and try to do a one shot with my group in DCC.
It
Cause like
is.
going from 5e to DCC isn't that hard, and I feel like that might be the sort of like refreshing, refreshment uh that we need. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally see that. Yeah, and I mean, I love DCC because it's so nostalgic for the 1970s when I first started playing the game,
Right.
right?
Well,
And
I first started playing games with you, so it was, AD&D and GURPS, so
right.
not
Well, that's
as
what we
much
have
for me, but
now.
a little bit.
So, but yeah, no, totally. And then I wanted to talk about there are some systems. I've got Delta Green, the fall of Delta Green, or the Delta Green system here. Um, from Pelgrane Press, and they've done something very clever. There are points in the story where if you have amassed enough clue tokens, it kind of sounds like Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, um, but one of the currencies in the game are clues, and once you hit a certain threshold of clues, you get to the next piece of the story.
There's like a cut scene, and it's like
Yeah,
kind of
almost.
like
It's
that.
it's it's not quite that video gamey, but it's very similar to like, okay, we've interrogated it's set in the 1960s Vietnam.
Hmm.
So we've interrogated the prisoner that we've captured in the tunnels, and we've talked to higher headquarters, and we got the classified dossier from the expert at the Pentagon. We've got three clues. Now, when we go into the tunnels that the Viet Cong are using to ferry ammunition to the enemy, and we encounter this thing, we know what it is, and we can open the portal or the gate or the door and move to the next part of the adventure.
I dig
So
that.
they've taken the whole like perception roll for perception, roll for arcana, roll for find traps. Nope, that's gone. Like you are ready. You've done what you needed to do in the previous session. You're ready for the next thing.
Right, right. You've been playing for 3 hours already. It's not a make it or break it. You find the hidden door or you don't kind of roll.
Right. So you don't need to fudge those. And
Oh,
I've seen
good.
Alien on the list, and we talked a lot about Alien. We didn't talk about fudge.
Yeah, you mentioned that, but in the pre-show, but didn't explain it very much, and
So
I'm not familiar with that one.
fudge is a role play game system. It was a free one written on the internet back before the internet was the internet. This is, I think it's 10.
Back when it was ARPANET.
Yeah, well, a little bit before that, but not much, not much. It was back in I want to say it's the nine. My history lesson is off, so I'll have to go look it up again. But, um, and they use a six-sided die, but it's special six-sided dies that just have pluses and minuses.
So I I went I googled Fudge RPG, and the first thing on their website is what's new, the Princess Bride role-playing game.
Yes. So,
Oh,
so,
I'm down a rabbit hole now.
oh gosh. So Fudge is a generic role play system. Um, and it's been out for a while. It's an award winning. It was nominated for an Origins award, and it uses six sided dice with pluses and minuses. It's a very rules light system. So you have they call it the ladder, um, and you'll take your ability. So I'm trying to pick this lock. So I take my lock pick ability. I grab four fudge dice. I roll them, and if it's a plus, I add one. If it's a minus, I take away one. So if I roll plus plus minus blank, I rolled a one, right? Plus plus minus. So one plus, two plus, that's two. A minus down to one, and a blank is nothing. So I add one to my lock pick ability, and that will tell me on the ladder whether it's a good, great, epic, or success, and that's kind of the challenge rating system. Um, so I know we talked about fudging rolls, and I'm sure some listener out there is going to go, "Are they going to talk about fudge?" And of course, the spiritual or the commercial successor to fudge is Fate from Evil Hat Productions.
And I'm not familiar with that either.
Yeah, no, I've got that hardcover in my hand right here, and again, it's generic. So you basically create a Fate game. It's a home brewer's dream, my friend. Um,
Hmm.
with the core rulebook, you can play basically anything from um, cavemen, fantasy, Wild West, weird World War II, modern day, cyberpunk, Lovecraftian horror, sci-fi. Um, yeah, it's very cool.
I can't find. So the Kickstarter for the Princess Bride role-playing game was like 2 years ago,
Aw,
and I
you
can't.
missed it.
Yeah, I've missed it by a little bit more than a little. Um, And the only place that I can find to get it is Amazon. All right, that's fine. I will look for that later. But that's hella cool. Didn't know that existed.
Well, that now you have to learn how to play Fate or Fudge.
Fudge, yeah. I don't know. It sounds interesting. I like that it's kind of rules light. Um, I don't know. It's refreshing as a DM. I'm just a little not burnt out, but I had a lot going on that last session, and I'm just still wary about it.
Sure.
Um, are there any other systems that strike you as being worth noting as they relate to fudging rolls?
Fudging rolls. I'm
I mean, we've talked about like paranoia before, but
yeah.
you can't really,
So
a computer
with
die is a computer die.
with
Like,
paranoia, yeah, and I'm thinking about things like paranoia. DCC is kind of in the same category where um your characters in paranoia and in some respect in DCC aren't these like epic story. Like I've developed this backstory. Like in paranoia, for example, you're one of 6 clones, and it takes about 20 minutes for the group to generate all your characters.
right.
So if you lose a clone, you're actually supposed to lose a clone. You're supposed to die at least once or twice for fun. Um, so
For
so
fun.
fudging rolls there doesn't make a lot of unless you're going to fudge a roll so that you get mulched. But then, I mean, you've got agency. So if you really want to get mulched, you just I'm going to
F
jump
you,
in and macerate.
computer. Computer doesn't own me.
And yeah, the computer doesn't own me. I'm going to jump through this hatch. Oh, okay, that's a heat exchanger, and now you're at 900 degrees centigrade. Oh, I vaporize. Um, so yeah, and in DCC the same thing, right? You generate a character, you make it through the funnel, you make it to level 3, and then something bad happens and you die. It's like, oh, okay, cool, that was fun. Let's go back and start another funnel, and um, you don't spend a lot. I'm looking at some of my other books like Monarchies of Mao and Pugmire and 5e, and it's like, no, you spend a lot of time making those characters, and you don't want to see bad things happen to them. But
Right.
no, there's other systems where the chaos isn't as it's still impactful, right? I'm not trying to say, oh yeah, you play paranoia and who gives a crap what you do. It's still fun and you're having a good time, and there are
Right. There's
interesting
still a
choices.
narrative and goals.
Right, and you're gonna make some interesting choices, and there's gonna be risk, but the risks themselves, and yeah, you could wind up dead, you could wind up marked as a traitor, but the um it doesn't carry such a negative connotation. Like I don't want to use the word less value. Like my paranoia clones have less value than my drow cavalier from Pathfinder,
Hmm.
um, or Downfear. I'm sorry, my Downfear Cavalier from Pathfinder. But there's less investment. That's what I'm saying. You're less emotionally invested in some of these characters, so the outcomes, if they are failure, not such a big deal. And while we're talking about outcomes and fudging dies, there are systems. Seventh C is one of them that rewards failure. So as a player character, I can put together my dice pool, roll, look at the dice pool, and look at my friends around the table and go, nope, I'm supposed to sail the ship to safety. I fail,
Hmm.
and
And
in which
that's
case you get a hero point, right? So you get rewarded by the GM for failing, um, and then again, seven C is a very kind of improv shared story experience. You and the GM and your other players are going to talk about, well, what does that failure look like? Okay, we're in the storm, we're on the pirate ship. The guy who's supposed to sail us to safety has just said, I want a hero point. I'd like to fail sailing the ship to safety. Well, that could mean that the ship sinks and you're all on a lifeboat. That could mean that the ship runs aground, not near where you were trying to sail. That could mean that the rigging gets all trashed in the storm, and now the ship is stuck in the middle of the ocean. Like there's a bunch, and you as the GM and the party will kind of arrive at a conclusion that keeps the story going, and that everyone kind of is on board with.
I since I've looked a little bit at 7C, since that's something that we hopefully will be able to play soon.
Yes.
I'm reminded by what you said earlier about applying. If you do fudge a roll, you apply some sort of negative to it to keep balance in the world. Um, and here I is hero points is the mechanic to do that in 7C, right? Like that's what I've gathered.
So yes, yep.
Okay.
It can definitely be used to kind of balance that out because um, the GM can actually give players hero points um, if they want. So, and again, we should probably set up a deep dive for 7C on one of our shows.
Yeah, we
Uh,
should.
but yeah, so if the GM wants to do an intrusion, they want to do something, and that's actually GM intrusion is language out of the Numenera core rulebook. But it's a similar idea. Like you as the player, you've rolled your dice pool, you've got a bunch of raises. You're gonna tell that gives you the right to tell the story the way you want to tell it. Um, Me as the GM, if I'm looking at what you're trying to do with your character and you're going to advance your story, but you might drag the party away from the final encounter with the boss, or what might be good for you might not be so great for another player at the table. I can say, John, I'd like to buy 2 of your successes here, 2 hero points. And then you're going to go, well,
Ooh.
okay, like if I can take these because the hero points are super powerful, right? Um,
Well,
and
kinda.
we've crashed the ship. We're on the reef, and you're going to use your carpentry and craftsmanship and wits and build a raft and get to the monastery where you're trying to get to.
Mhm.
And you roll enough successes to have that happen and have it happen quickly. I, as the GM, could say, here's a hero point. I'd like one of your successes. And instead of doing it all in one day, you have to spend 2 days on the raft. And then you, as the player, can go, yeah, okay. We'll hit the beach and we'll
Bargaining with fate.
yes, a little bit, right?
Huh.
Um, that helps the GM and the players kind of balance out the story.
There's a player in my group who I really think would like 7C. That sounds right up his alley.
Got to get them on board.
I know. I think it's just I don't know, the fear of learning a new system, I guess. I don't know if it's fear, but it's the new system anxiety. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you're comfortable with a role play game system, looking at new systems can be challenging, right?
I no. No is
But
my
so
instinctual response to that because looking at 5e isn't challenging at all. So it's just like what you decide to do. I just don't think
right,
that, popularity does a whole lot of favors for other systems.
yeah, no, that's totally true, totally true. I'm excited for the new Paranoia video game that's going to hit the PlayStation in a couple months.
I saw the release trailer for that or the announcement trailer, whatever it was, and that looked very comical.
Very, very, yeah. So I'm hopeful that that will bring in more tabletop Paranoia players.
And here I am excited for Baldur's Gate 3. So
Nothing wrong with that.
No, that's play what you have fun with. We end every show with like play something that do fun. Do fun.
Right. Do fun.
um yeah, do you have any other thoughts on fudging? I guess my last
I
consideration to tell people would be do it rarely if you need to, and do it in a way that is fair and more often helps the players and you have fun and have epic, memorable moments in your game.
Yep, I agree with that.
All right. So that's, we got through this a little bit quicker than normal, but nothing wrong with that. We have had some long
Nope.
episodes, so it's fine that this one is a bit shorter. This has been Set the Table, episode 11. If you want to connect with us, find out when future shows are, what they are, ask us questions. You can do so a couple different ways. First and foremost is to follow myself at jmscota5, or you can look for at Red Hoodie Games over on Twitter. Between show weeks, I try to post some content for use in home RPGs at redhoodiegames5.wordpress.com. I haven't done that for a week or two, but I will have something brewing. Or if you would like to support us in what we're doing here on the show, chat with us more regularly, ask us questions, have questions asked and answered on the show, then please head on over to patreon.com/Skoda. That's Skoda. And at the smallest level for $1, you get access to the patron Discord and everything that comes with that. So that is going to be it for me, for Jack. It's been Set the Table episode 11, and we will see you next time.
Good day, eh?